What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Today. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Today, and boy, do we have a special guest, Jason Redman's in the house. What's up, brother?
Darius, what's up, man? What's up, Greatness Machine listeners? Good to see you.
Oh, man, I am so freaking pumped that you were on the show, Jason. Man, this is a good day today for Darius. So thank you for coming on the show, my friend. It's it's been an honor to have you here, seriously.
Yeah, thanks, man. Honored to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So, audience, you guys, anyone that's like watching this, you'll probably recognize Jason. You're a pretty recognizable guy, but I've been following you like passively over social. You get a lot of like press and for good reason, man. You're doing amazing work in the world. But you came across my radar. I don't know what it is. So when I was, I'm 46. So I was 21. And I went down to San Diego, and there was a girl that I was like dating, and her next door neighbor was a Navy SEAL, and he and I ended up sitting down. This is in May of 2000. We sat there and drank beers for 5 hours, and I was just fascinated. It was the beers or the
of consuming alcohol.
yeah, totally. And so I didn't even understand. I think what it is, man, I'm like a former collegiate D1 athlete, like hardcore competitor. And it was just something about the fact that like Navy SEALs, you guys are just cut from a different cloth. And being a Division I wrestler, there's, that's a sport where I always tell people, that's a sport where you get your ass beat until you're good. Right. So there's just a part of me that like respects hard things. That's just kind of part of my nature in essence. And so I was very fascinated by it. And so as growing up, as an adult, like I found that fascination to continue to even to the show. We probably interviewed at least a half dozen Navy SEALs on the show. And so I saw your work, man. Obviously you've done some really amazing stuff, but that was what drew me to you. And I immediately asked the team to start reaching out. So super grateful to have you come on the show and share your story with our audience and really some of the lessons you've learned through your life and some of the work you're promoting. If you wouldn't mind, though, I'd love if I could give some of your formal bio, and then we could get into your origin story. Are you down for that?
I'm down for it. Send it.
All right, let's do it. So you guys, Jason, besides being an all-around badass, is just conquering life in so many ways. New York Times best-selling author of books like The Trident, Overcome, Point Man Planner. He's got his newest book coming out in March, Mission Invincible Marriage. He and his wife, Erica, have that book coming out. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. He's a retired Navy SEAL, 21 years as a naval officer, spent 10 years leading SEAL teams in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we're going to get really deep into that work that he did there. He's an international speaker, big keynote speaker and coach. Spoken to some of the largest organizations in the world and founder of SOF Spoken. So, man, Jason, I love that you're doing so many cool things around leadership in the world and just the work you're doing, but would love to hear, I know you didn't wake up one day and just enter the Navy SEALs and do all the crazy, amazing things you've done. Would love if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit of your origin story. How did you get to where you got to?
Yeah, I mean, I nothing special about my upbringing. I mean, there are some guys out there, they grew up on the wrong side of the tracks or whatever. There was none of that. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money. My parents divorced when I was young. I split. My parents split, moved apart, and I just kind of bounced back and forth between the two of them. I think the biggest variable that drove me towards the SEAL teams is I come from a family of service. My both grandfathers served in World War II, so I grew up listening to those stories. My dad served in the Army during Vietnam. He didn't go over to Vietnam, but he trained guys. He was an airborne instructor, so I grew up listening to those stories. And I remember playing with his old parachute gear and thinking how cool that was. I was, from a young age, that's all I ever wanted to do was go in the military. and kind of fascinated with special operations, Rangers, long range recon patrol. I was a product of the G.I. Joe generation. So Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and all those guys I thought were so cool. And when I was about 14, my dad said, hey, there's a group of guys in the Navy. They're called Navy SEALs. And up till 1990, up till 2001, after 9/11, all SEALs went through Army Airborne School, including me. In 95, I went to Army Airborne School after SEAL training. So my dad had met SEALs. He had seen them going through training, and he said, you should check these guys out. So now this is 1990 or 1988, I guess, when I was maybe even younger than that, 87 maybe. And internet didn't exist. You could find almost nothing about SEAL teams. And my dad just said, hey, you should check these guys out. Hardest training, badasses. He said, you're a good swimmer. You should look into this. And I did. And whatever I could find about them, I think for most people would have deterred them. You know, there wasn't a whole lot, but I kept seeing over and over again, hardest training in the U.S. military, hardest training in the U.S. military. And there was something about that just lured me and said, I want that. I want to know, can I do this? And number two, I want to be part of this group. And I never lost sight of that. I mean, I was 14 when I locked onto that, and I was not the normal. You know, there are some guys who come into the SEAL teams and they were beasts. They were captain of the football team. They were NCAA collegiate, you know, gold medal wrestlers and all these things. And I was a runt. I was the most unlikely guy. People would make fun of me like, oh, you're going to become a SEAL? Yeah, whatever, dude. But that just fueled my fire even more. Even when I went into the recruiting station for the first time when I was 16 and told the recruiter I wanted to be a SEAL, the dude laughed me out of the recruiting office, and it just fueled me even more. So I never lost sight of that goal. I trained myself. I really wasn't an athlete, but I recognized, hey, if you're going to be a SEAL, you need to be an athlete. So even though my dad had told me I was too small, remember I told you I was a runt, to play football, I went out for the football team, got my ass kicked on a regular basis. I started wrestling. I wrestled 119 pounds in North Carolina. Our other 119 pounder was our state champion. So he would just the floor with me. But there was just something about it that I was like, there was just this fire within me. Like, the more you beat me down, the more I'm going to drive forward. And that was just this common theme that led me right up to, you know, September 11, 1992, I was senior in high school is when I enlisted in what was called the delayed entry program. And with the goal to SEAL training, I headed off to boot camp right after I graduated high school in 1993.
Oh, man. Well, I love hearing that you're a fellow wrestler and getting your ass kicked like that. Like, I was like that too. I got my ass kicked. I like my first 3 years I wrestled. Less and less until I was good, but it probably helped a lot with with the SEAL side of it. Would you agree with that?
We have a lot of wrestlers. Wrestling is it's a team sport in the aspect that everybody works together. You're part of a team, but at the end of the day, when you step on the mat, it's you and that other dude. And this plays such a big part of wrestling. Your conditioning, you know, getting ready, the strategy. If you know you got a guy who's super strong or quick, you know, how do you navigate that? Vince Crump, our state champion, he was amazing with legs. I mean, he was all around, but boy, he would just move on you with his legs.
Wait, you were his wrestling partner, so you had to subdue those just leg right in the hell out of you.
He was like taller and lean, which just whooped my ass, bro. But we have a lot of SEALs who are wrestlers. It's very common. I think because SEAL training is similar to that. You're part of a team, but at the end of the day, it's your own individual effort, your own individual ability to endure the suck, the pain, the discomfort, and keep driving forward and performing. And that, you know, wrestling's a lot like that.
Yeah, it's funny that the wrestling, like, you play basketball, you play football, you play baseball, you don't play wrestling, man. Like that's like you're straight up fighting somebody. But that's cool. We had a former guest, Jack Carr, came on the show. He's a SEAL, as I'm sure you know him. But he was talking about how he was like found out about Navy SEALs again, like I'm a little bit younger than you, but we're Gen X. We're at an age where like you found out about stuff at the library or someone told you about it. There was no like Google, right?
That's
And
right.
so, he found out at a young age. That's pretty interesting that I've heard you're the third SEAL or fourth SEAL I've talked to that wasn't like some like gnarly athlete, but had that resilience, that fire within you where you're like, oh, I'm just gonna do it. Like, and so that's it seems common, right? And when you hear,
I would say it's much more common in the SEAL teams that we have more guys. Probably 75% of us we might have been decent athletes, but we weren't these star athletes. And many of SEALs I know were like the gray man before they became SEALs. And don't get me wrong, there's probably 25% of us who were just studs. I mean, but what I've come to find, and I know a lot of other SEALs will say this also, is oftentimes the guys who were just the most gifted athletes, who were just the rock stars at whatever they did, they were the guys who didn't make it through training. And my theory on that is because they were genetically gifted enough in life that they didn't have to work as hard. They just were really good. They were genetically gifted and they were just naturally talented to where they could run faster and hand-eye coordination and throwing, or they were quicker, or whatever it was that made them such a star athlete. SEAL training breaks everyone. I don't care who you are, it will break you. It's designed to do that. So somebody who's never really encountered that, it's a shock. And I think it really messes with egos and confidence of people who've never encountered that. And I think that happens a lot. For those of us who've been getting our ass kicked for years, it's just like, it's just part of the process.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I'm like, if you grew up, you're the best athlete, you get picked first, you're like crushing it. The coaches pay more attention to you because they love watching you just hit home run after home run. It's like probably pretty rare that you've, to your point, gotten just totally lost where you had to like pick yourself up and rebuild from a loss, right? I was lucky enough to be like not the best athlete and not good looking, so I always had to try extra hard at everything I did, right?
Yeah.
It makes you a lot funnier and it makes you try a lot harder. You know what I mean?
Yep. I love it. It's true.
But so you got after it, you went in the SEALs. But yeah, I was talking on a former show with someone about this, where it was like a lot of these guys ring the bell when they're these Olympians, these people that they get there. And to your point, like they break because, and I think that's this element of resilience that their talent has taken them so far that there wasn't this resilience moment where they had to like overcome not winning, right? Overcome losing and having to like just go beyond like your mind will quit before your body does, right? And like they probably haven't hit that wall. I mean, did you see that? Like was it so shocking to you when you saw it in the SEALs?
Maybe in the beginning it was a little shocking, I think, and you feel it. I remember getting to SEAL training, and once again, skinny little runt. I was, I'm 5'8" and about 170 pounds. When I went through SEAL training at 19 years old, I was probably 5'7". I was a late bloomer, and I think I was 135 pounds when I checked
Wow.
SEAL training. I was a skinny little runt. And there were dudes in that class who looked like they had come off the cover of Muscle and Fitness. I remember looking at those guys thinking to myself, like, how am I ever going to make it through training with these guys, But I just said, hey, I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to quit. That's the secret. I try and explain that to people, young men, when they go through SEAL training is, the interesting thing about SEAL training is we don't necessarily kick guys out. I mean, yes, you can fail things and get kicked out, but if you're meeting the minimum requirement, you're not going to be kicked out. The instructors may dislike you. They may feel like you're too slow. They may feel like you're ugly. They come up with everything why they don't like you, and they don't like anyone when you're going through SEAL training. So they'll figure out some excuse why they don't like you, and they'll apply that pressure because of that. But what I try and tell guys is, unless you ring that bell, like you have an 80% chance of graduating from training. And I've translated that to life. It's no different in this life. Everybody just, we've conditioned society to quit and seek comfort, when the reality is, man, 80% of success in this life is just continuing to show up and grind forward. So many people quit and self-select themselves out, even before some external factor would select them out, because they believe like maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I'm the wrong size. Maybe I'm not good enough to be this leader. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And guys do that in SEAL training too.
So when you were, it's funny when you're just talking about the strength. There's a couple nuggets here, but you know, it's funny. I had a moment. I think I was kind of a late bloomer too, in a different way. I was like chubby and like not tall. You know, I'm like 5'8" and like 210 when I'm like 16, right? Like not a good size for wrestling because you're wrestling heavyweights, more or less, right? And but you're not strong. So I had to like, you know, figure that out. But there's guys that are, I'm like, that guy looks like Dolph Lundgren from the Rocky IV movie, and he's like 17, right? And you go out there and they just like, you're like, genetically there's a differential here. But what's shocking to me is when I hear you say that for the SEAL team, like, how did that work? Were you strong enough, or like physically were you strong enough to be able to keep up, or was it a thing where they're like, hey, you met the standard to be there, but it's just a matter of, can you handle like the pressure to stay on the team? I mean, when I think of like most of the people I know who are special forces, and I've met enough at this point in my life, like in my brain, I was like, look, if you're too heavy or too big, it's kind of hard because there's a lot of body weight stuff. And so I actually thought like smaller guys have an advantage because you're climbing over walls and you know, maybe the carrying stuff is a little bit more difficult. But how did that work for you? I'd love to hear about that.
I mean, I was pretty strong for my body weight, but you're right. The average SEAL is only 5'10" and 180. That's what a lot of people don't understand. They think that SEALs are these great big 6'5" Arnold Schwarzenegger types. And we have those guys, don't get me wrong. But most guys are not that way. As a matter of fact, you nailed it. Most bigger guys physically break. I mean, that's the reality. During SEAL training, Hell Week alone, I think somebody estimated that you cover almost 200 miles during that week. So if you think about that, if you're 220, 250, that's a lot of weight pounding on your body for that long when you're not getting any sleep and all these different things. And you're right, body weight, huge strength. So it's strength and endurance with your body weight is one of the big things, the ability to do dozens of pull-ups, dozens of push-ups, dozens of dips, rope climbs, all these things. Later it becomes with weight. So I was good at that. But don't get me wrong. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses in the SEAL teams. I was a fast runner. I wasn't the greatest swimmer. Even though I grew up swimming, there were guys I was never a competitive swimmer. I was comfortable in the water. I wasn't fast. That was a weakness for me that I had to overcome. There was a guy in my first couple of platoons who was a huge guy. He was 6'2", 6'3", and his average weight was about 250. Now he slimmed down to about 220 in buds, but back when we got into a platoon, he went back to his normal weight, which was about 250. He could outlift me all day long. I couldn't hold a candle to his natural strength. We used to joke about him like, hey, Tom runs the same speed no matter what. You could strap a Volkswagen to his back. He could carry it at exactly the same speed as he did without it. I could outrun him all day long. I could run circles around him. But, for me, I was super strong for my body weight, but I couldn't compete with his strength, So, but it's all about overall ability, And now this is where you start to leverage people's strengths and weaknesses. So usually our big guys became 60 gunners. They'd be carrying the M60 machine gun and all this weight. Funny, I was a smaller guy. I ended up being a communicator, which I carried damn near as much weight as our 60 gun. It is what it is. You are able to you're pushed to do the minimum, and most guys are able to exceed that. But no matter what, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and you figure out how to maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses, and that's what makes the SEAL team super effective. No different in life.
Yeah, no, that's exactly where my brain went. So, one of the things that that's most prominent outside of all the Navy SEAL stuff is that you were injured in battle pretty badly. And that it was funny, like knowing that, right?
Darius, can I make one last comment on that? Because I want to say this was a little bit of my mindset. And if any young kid or anybody's looking at this,
Yeah.
Tom, our biggest guy, whenever we did down man drills, meaning we would have to carry a down man, and we would do training to practice for that, I would always grab Tom because I was like, if I can carry Tom, I know I can carry anybody else. And no one can ever say, hey, the skinny little runt, man, I don't want that guy carrying me. He probably can't carry me. So I would always pick Tom. And that was a mindset I had. I wanted to show I had the ability to do what anybody else could do. And that's the difference. I think you don't shy away from like, oh, this could potentially be a weakness. I'm like, I'm going to hit this head on. And that was something I always did no matter what. I think that makes a difference as you're driving forward in this life. I mean, in some ways, it could almost be like a fuck you, I'm going to do this, which I've come to find sometimes you run through life with a chip on your shoulder that can be a deterrent instead of an advantage, but oftentimes it can be an advantage. So I just wanted to throw that out.
It's funny though, like three things come to mind when you say that. Number one is, I think as a young man or young person, because maybe even with women this is true, it's like there's a lot of value in the warrior mentality. Like, I think that like you haven't done anything in your life yet, really, outside of just been alive and been a kid. So having that warrior mentality because life doesn't care. Life's like, dude, I'm not trying to be easy for you. And when you haven't have experience and you don't have, you have talent, but you don't have experience as far as life and or work experience, or, leverage that experience to learn of hardship. Like, my belief is the warrior mentality gets you that what you need, because life's just going to tell you to fuck off. People are just going to tell you what you can't do. Like,
That's right.
and it's your job to be like, yeah, I don't care. I'm just going to go do it. Right. And so I actually think that what you just said makes the most sense, because I think that right now we live in a world where you kind of get like gaslit for being a warrior, and which kills me, because I'm like, dude, I wouldn't have done anything if I listened to everyone who told me I couldn't do anything. I would have quit everything.
Kids that like, hey man, no just means there's another path to yes. That's all it means. Make them tell you no. And if they say no, then there usually is another path. You got to exhaust all your paths. There's always a different way to get there. And I've just lived my life that way, and it's enabled me to find some great success.
We have a good friend of mine who's a former guest on the show. He's a mentalist. His name is Wayne Hoffman. He says he has a thing. It says like he's trying to put it out there more and more, but he says it's that no lives in the world of, or yes lives in the world of no's. Right. Yep. And you don't know until you just do it. Right. So I love what you're saying. So the other thing that you reminded me of is a former guest, Gabby Reese, the volleyball player. She calls herself a hand raiser. She's like, I'm a hand raiser. And I'm like, oh, I'm a hand raiser too. And what I heard you just say is like, dude, I'm a fucking hand raiser.
Yes.
Like, got big guys on the ground. I'm a hand raiser. Like, I'm just like, fuck it. I'm going to do it. Yeah. And so like, is this just part of your wiring? Is it your family like this? Is this like, was this just like how you showed up? Is this part of your essence? I'd love to hear more about how did you come to become such a hand raiser?
Yeah, I think it was just, I was always told you're too small, you're the runt. And that lives inside your head. You plant those seeds. That's why I never did it at my kids. I would never tell my kids, I would never try and place these negative things in their mind. I always told my kids, you can do anything. We live in, that's what's so amazing about this country with freedom and opportunity. I believe it. So because of that, I was always like, well, even though I'm a run, I'm in the SEAL teams. Like, I got to step up, I got to fight. I got to do these things. And frequently I got my ass kicked. I had a big mouth too. You talk about making up for, you made up for a lack of size with humor and wit and trying to be funny. And sometimes that backfired on me.
Oh yeah. I got punched in the face a bunch of times from the age 12 to about 16 for saying the wrong thing to the wrong person.
Yeah. And when you're in a platoon of pipe hitters, man, I found myself in wrestling matches, or we had gloves, go get the gloves. And, I remember my LPO took me out back and beat up on me for a while.
I love it, man. So Going back to resilience, though, having been, injured in battle, like, would you mind telling us a little bit about that? I'd love to hear that, because I think like you came out of that other side of that and have created such an impact. But I feel like that's such an important part of your formation.
Yeah. And we got to take one step back, and I'll try and tell this really fast. When I got wounded, I launched out of that because of something that had happened prior. And what had happened prior is I had failed as a young leader. I was an enlisted guy who later became an officer. I talked about, I was smart enough and good enough, but sometimes ran my mouth too much and was very forward leaning. Well, I carried all that into leadership. So much so that I started to become a little arrogant about my abilities. Excelling, I think this happens a lot in young men who excel at a young age. And I did. I did very well as a young enlisted guy. I became an instructor. I got recommended for a commission. I went to school, got ranked #1 out of a 320-man ROTC program. Came back to the SEAL teams thinking like, hey, man, I'm the best. And 9/11 happened while I was at school. So suddenly everything changed overnight. Our tactics, we're going to war. And I really started to screw up. I started stepping on my toes, started making mistakes. I was too proud to go to guys who technically were less experienced in time than me, but significantly more experienced because they had been around conducting operations while I was at school. I was too proud to put my ego away to say, hey, man, like even though, I've been around, technically I'm higher rank, I don't know how to do this. And all of that led to the perfect storm where coping with it by drinking too much alcohol, which did not do well. Always a dangerous thing as a leader. You need to be in control of yourself and manage yourself. I was not doing that. And then I made a bad call on a mission in Afghanistan. Almost got myself kicked out of the SEAL teams. Thankfully, I had some leadership who believed in me and gave me a second chance, sent me to U.S. Army Ranger School, got my Ranger tab, probably one of the best things that could have happened to me. It humbled me, gave me a whole new appreciation for leadership, which became the foundation today of everything I speak on in leadership. I just continue to build on that foundation that happened there. So fast forward, after that leadership failure, it took several years to earn back my credibility, because when I had messed up, the guys, they were like, that's that dude that fucked up in Afghanistan. Like he's going to get people killed. I don't want to work with that guy. And that's a really hard thing in our community. So once again, I was faced with the prospect of a community that said, hey, we don't want to work with you.
Wow.
To get back to the grind and just say, well, fuck off, man. I don't care if you don't want to work with me. I'm just going to figure out how to slowly but surely earn back your trust. And I'm going to do that by 3 things. Number 1, I'm just going to focus relentlessly on leading myself. Number 2, that's going to lead into, if you can lead yourself, you can effectively lead others. People will follow you if you give them a reason to. It's human nature. Humans naturally follow success. So I don't care if you're in the SEAL teams, if you're in the NFL, if you're a hedge fund manager, if you're a lawyer, if you're successful, other people in your line are going to follow you because they want to learn from your success. And then rule number 3, you got to lead always. And that's where I'd failed also. Alcohol had been a negative aspect for me. I was more concerned about myself and really started to change all that. So fast forward 2 years, earned all that back. Went to Iraq with a amazing team, probably one of the best troops I ever had the honor to work with, some of the most talented, just an incredible group of guys that we had such amazing camaraderie and synergy together. And we stepped in, and thank God we did, because we stepped into Iraq at a very volatile time in the spring through the summer of 2007. Probably some of the heaviest fighting you saw in Iraq was 06, 07. And we were operating out of Fallujah within the Anbar province in that time frame. We conducted over 80 direct action capture kill mission, and very hard and heavy, and going after mid-level and high-level leaders, and got into multiple gunfights. And unfortunately, at the very end of that deployment, probably a week before we came home, my team and I were going after a high-level leader, and and things went wrong. We walked in, they set up a very good ambush on us, and we walked into that ambush. And myself and other team members were all shot up. I was hit 8 times between my body and body armor by a machine gun, including a round in the face. Was pinned down. You know, I owe my life to my team who fought to save me, and an Air Force AC-130 gunship. It's an aircraft that has amazing targeting software and weaponry. We call it an air-to-ground asset, and probably one of the most amazing assets in the Air Force arsenal for saving troops on the ground. And that night, they brought in the closest fire mission ever executed. They fired directly on our position, and miraculously, we survived and got out of there. So I woke up in the hospital 96 hours after that, and facing all kinds of bad news. I mean, I had taken 2 rounds in the left elbow. The doctors were talking about amputating my arm above the elbow. I had no use of my left hand. My nose was gone. Cheek was broken and kicked out to the left. Jaw was broken. Orbital floor was gone. All the bones above my eye were broken. I was wired shut. I was trached. They were feeding me through a stomach tube. They were telling me a lot of people have seen my skull, because that skull, you know, we've made it into a line of clothing and all this stuff. But that skull was taken directly off the acrylic model of the doctors trying to figure out how to put my face back together. And I was just told all these negative things. You know, you're never going to operate again. Unfortunately, that one was true. They said, you know, it's going to take years to put you back together. That was true too. In my mind, though, I also was thinking I'm going to be forever disabled and I'm going to be permanently disfigured, and sort of true. But that was a very difficult moment. And like, how do I approach this? And I will tell you what, it was the leadership failure and navigating myself out of that. Those 3 lessons: lead yourself, lead others, lead always. And that foundation that had been built through hardship and being broken is what led me to success and launch out of those injuries. So that's why I tell people, hey man, if you're going through hard times, be thankful for it. Because guess what? That is when you truly build your overcome muscles. They're not built in good times. You know, you can't just create an overcome mindset from scratch when the world turns upside down. It is only through hard times. So the more hard times you've been through that you're willing to grind forward and grow from, the stronger you will be, and the bigger overcome muscles you will have as you go through this life.
So man, first of all, that's a gnarly story. Thank you for sharing it. I didn't know the extent of it, but it's I'm not surprised that you came out of it with that, and it's interesting to know that situation happened earlier.
My first book, The Trident, it follows this whole story. So a lot of people who find me online, they see high-level Navy SEAL, shot up, overcame it. What a lot of them don't dig deeper under the surface, if they haven't read my book, that book's all about that. That book is about failure. I failed as a young leader, like crash and burn, gun in my mouth in Afghanistan, almost blew my brains out failure. And what's great about that book is when people read it, so many people are like, oh my God, that was not what I expected. It was so much better. The other thing, lots of people out there that have failed in some aspect of their life have written me and said, man, I really needed to hear that.
Yeah.
So many people, when we fail, we think that it's the end. And I'm like, guess what? When you fail, it's a new beginning. That's all it is. If you're willing to go down that road, it's only the end if you're willing to not get back up again.
I guess one question for you, because you're talking to someone that's had some pretty gnarly business failures that I've overcome. And always, every time, I always come out better on the other side. And every time I'm like, man, that was gnarly. I'm way better now because of it. And then I have this thought, which is, even though I know it's like the chrysalis that I'm coming out of, right? I'm like, man, I want to do that again. I'm always like, I don't like
nobody will. But that being said, if you had to, you would.
Usually, yeah. Usually, I think I've had one or two times where I'm like, man, I'm stronger because of it, but like I really I would have done it differently. I guess you know what though, I learned a lot from it to do it better next time. You know,
Same. There are definitely many things that if I could go back and do them over, I would have been much smarter as a leader. I wouldn't have made all the mistakes I made.
yeah,
I matured very late in life. I
yeah.
was I was a young, immature knucklehead, smart enough and good enough to still excel, but I could have exponentially grown so much faster if I'd let go of some of the more immature paths and habits.
So do you think that your learning when you had that mishap, it was you said it was in Afghanistan or was in Iraq or
Yeah,
not?
Afghanistan. Yep.
So
2000.
so so you it sounds like you there was a moment where people turned their back on you and they're like, I'm not working with that dude. And it sounds like from what you just said a moment ago that took you to a pretty dark place. Did you feel like, oh, I'm a failure? And like, and how did you rebuild yourself? Because that one thing you said, the rule number one is lead yourself. It's a great bumper sticker, but you know when you're there and it's dark and you're like, fuck, I can't, like, I'm a loser. I can't believe I did that. All the self doubt. People are not there patting you on the back, telling you they believe in you. Usually, if you're lucky, you'll have one or two of those, but like many people don't. And even if they do, you maybe don't believe them. What was it where you're like, where you grab your bootstraps, you're like, fuck it, I got to fix this.
There were several things, and you're absolutely right. There were plenty of people who were friends of mine who stopped talking to me and turned their back on me. My wife was not one of those people, thank God.
Yeah.
That's why I'm really thankful. We're excited for this relationship book. I think, you know, if you truly have an amazing marriage, your spouse will be one of your greatest advocates, even when you fuck up. Even if they know you fucked up, they're not going to hold you down. They're just going to accept, hey, in this life, we all make mistakes. We all screw up. And if you have someone who's truly on your team, they're going to help pick you up in those moments. My wife was one of those people who kept encouraging me when I thought like maybe this is the end. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. The other thing was my kids. I literally almost took my life. I put a gun in my mouth in Afghanistan after all this happened, and I was ready to blow my brains out. And it was looking at the picture of my kids on the desk in front of me that was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what message do you send to them? You know, like the last message they'll ever have of their dad is, I wasn't important enough because my dad messed up and decided to kill himself in Afghanistan. Like, that's not the end of the story I wanted to write. So it shocked me enough to say, hey, man, you need to do this for them, you know, for your spouse, for you, you know. And then I did have a couple of really good leaders who believed in me. One of the more respected leaders in the SEAL teams. I talk a lot about him in both my original book, The Trident, and then Overcome. Probably by many in the SEAL teams who knew him will say he was one of the best leaders of our generation. And he was the one who told me when I went to Ranger School, I remember being on the phone with him and I said, hey, sir, I don't think I can do this. I said, I don't think the guys will ever accept me back as a leader after the mistakes I've made.
Mm.
And he said to me, Red, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. He said, that's it. He said, that's all leadership is. He said, so go crush Ranger School and come back to the SEAL teams and give the guys a reason to follow you. That was a little bit of hope I needed in this life, man. We all get beat down, you know, so you got to pick and choose. You got to ignore the negative advice, and hopefully you will have at least one person who believes in you. And that's what you got to hang on to, because this is the most dangerous battlefield you'll ever walk on. And sometimes you may not have that. So it needs to be you. I have ignored more hate and bullshit than I can even think about. And that's what's led to my success. I'm not the biggest, I'm not the brightest, I'm not the prettiest, I'm not the most talented, but I am relentlessly resilient and willing to drive forward. And having a couple of people who believe, that little ember of hope pours gasoline to turn it into a fire. And then the last mentor I had was my new leader that I stepped into that new troop. When after I had failed, I got assigned to a new troop, but now I'm coming with this tarnished reputation. And he sat me down right at the beginning. He said, Red, I don't care what happened in the past. All I care about is from this point forward. He said, I'm going to give you opportunities to lead, and there are going to be times I need you to follow. But no matter what, he said, I'm going to help grow you as a leader. And he did. And he did a lot to rebuild my confidence as a leader, but also to rebuild the confidence in the guys around me to understand I had the ability. Oh, man. And that's what happened over time. He put me in situations, complicated situations in training where the guys were like, oh, well, shit, this guy has the ability to do the job and to make good decisions, which is what we need, especially in combat.
Did you feel like obviously you're, kind of forged in that fire when you came out the other side? Was it just like small wins where you're like, oh, I'm seeing that I'm gaining their confidence back? And then was there a point where you're like, hey, I'm out of the woods here, I'm good, and I'm just going to be a good version of myself? Or was there still always haters and stuff like that, or people still talk shit, or at some point it was like old news?
So for me in the beginning, yes, there was definitely, but there was a definitive point, and it was when we had deployed to Iraq. We got involved in a very big, very complicated gunfight, June 22nd, 2007, only a few months before I got wounded. And a lot of chaos. We had wounded guys. Our interpreter was badly wounded, and there were just a lot of moving parts. It was the most complicated SEAL training scenario you could imagine, except it was real world, real bullets and real bombs and real bad guys. And I did very well out of that. And when we got back, the guys were like, "Hey, man, great job."
Nice.
I knew in that moment, that was kind of the definitive moment. Like, you did it, bro. You have come full circle and earned back your reputation. So don't fuck up.
It's funny. Oh, sorry. Finish your thought. Apologize.
Yeah. I mean, that was that. But moving forward, all I was going to say is that were there always haters? Yes. I would say 80% of the SEAL teams were like, hey, Red went and set the example. He got wounded. He set the example as SEAL. Are there still some guys in the SEAL teams that are like, fuck that guy? Absolutely. But that's always the case in super tight, type A personalities, big egos. You're always going to have haters, man.
Yeah. Haters are going to hate. You're right. There is always haters. What, it's funny when you were saying the thing about like friends turning their back on you. And I think that this is something like when you take risk, right? Inherently, things sometimes don't go your way, right? And there's a quote that I love. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You kind of brought it up a little bit, but I'd love to go a little deeper with you on it. And I've been someone that like has had some pretty good successes and then failed and then watched everyone like lost my entire friend group who worked for me. And I'm like, whoa, like, were you only here for like the success? That's fucking fucked up. I'm a super loyal person, right? And so I heard this quote, which is that success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. And every time I hear a story like you said, I'm like, that's the many fathers, right? Just like, oh yeah, he's my bud, yeah, of course they want to be around it, but the minute that they're challenged by their connection with you for whatever reason, dunzo, gone. Like, have you seen this in other parts, or like obviously that happened then? Have you had other experiences like that, or what are your thoughts on that from a leadership perspective?
Oh, 100%, man. So when I talk about these really hard moments in your life, I survived a vicious enemy ambush. But what I came to find is that everybody gets ambushed in life. And there are a lot of people that are like, oh my, they hear my gunfight story. And these are things that I talk about from stage. When people hear the gunfight story, they're like, for them, it's a movie. They can't relate to it. But what I tell them is like, you can't relate to the bullets and bombs of battle, but you can 100% relate to the bullets and bombs of life, because every single one of us have been involved in life ambushes. You have been hit by the bullets and bombs of life. It has been a failure. It's been the ending of a relationship. It's been bankruptcy, a lawsuit. It's been grievous injury or illness to you or someone you love. It's been sexual trauma to you or someone you love. It's been the loss of a loved one, or one of the biggest life ambushes I've seen is the loss of a child. And those emotional and mental bullets and bombs are far more devastating than the physical ones. That's why so often with our wounded warrior community, it is the invisible wounds that destroy guys far more than the physical ones. So I try and explain this to people that every one of us will go through life ambush. As a matter of fact, my book Overcome is much more about how we overcome life ambush. I say the Trident's the story, who overcomes the how to. And it's been interesting to me because people who have never been through a major life ambush, they don't quite understand the book. They're like, yeah, it's pretty good. People who've been through a major life ambush or really are in a life ambush right now, because what I call is the point of attack is called the X. And what I talk about is how we have to get off the X. An overcome mindset is built around getting off that X as quickly as possible. So people who are in a major life ambush and stuck on that X, those are the people who lose their minds over my book, who write me and say, oh my God, I can't tell you how much I needed that. Like I was stuck on the X. I didn't know how to get out of this situation. I had XYZ happen years ago, this divorce, I had this business failure. And, I've been working as a garbage man for the last 6 years, telling myself that I'll never amount to anything, not realizing that I've been pinned on that X ever since that moment. And so many people in this life do that. So the reality is, it's all of us have the ability to drive forward and get off the X. It's just, you've got to believe in yourself, ignore the naysayers, the haters, and understand that you're in that situation. Be aware enough to understand, hey, I'm stuck because of this thing that happened to me. A lot of people, for whatever reason, are in denial. They don't want to accept that.
Yeah, it's funny. Like as you were saying that, and I think everyone, I've seen this with lots of my friends. I grew up in a pretty privileged environment, but my dad was from Iran, married my mom, was American, like came here, rebuilt his life. And he was like, my dad was born in 1939 in Iran. Which I said, like being born in 1889 in the United States. Like kids were there to be workers, like my dad was hardcore. He was old school. So I grew up around a lot of kids whose parents weren't like that. These kids got whatever they wanted. And as an adult, I saw hardship happen to people for the, like, I knew these were some close friends where I'm like, dude, this person's never had hardship in like 37 years of their life. Like and I watched them melt the minute it happened. They have no idea how to handle anything. And so I actually feel like people kind of do themselves a disservice by not creating. I mean, I think that you can create some artificial hardship for your kids. Like yes. I do it. Like my kids are privileged. I'm like, dude, I make them do shit they don't want to do all the time. And yes. I'm telling you, like I look for those moments. My wife's like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because life's not easy. Like I need to make things harder for them. Because if they're like, dude, I've created a good life for them. They're like, they can't feel like it's easy street. What are your thoughts on that? Like like as a parent or as a leader, how do we make people more resilient so that when they get pinned on that X, because it's going to happen, they're going to get some X moment's going to happen. And if you have resilience, right away, you're like, all right, start going down the checklist. This isn't me. That's them. Fuck them. I'm good. And you can recover. I've noticed my recovery from hard shit is like pretty formulaic at this point. Like, dude, I do some funny shit. Like I got sued a bunch in one of my businesses, and now sometimes I get a lawyer letter. I'm like, oh, this is bullshit. Launched across the room. Like I'm like, this is just like part of being in business. Like people sometimes aren't happy with you. And it hasn't happened in a long time. But that was the point. That was me being forced the hardship of dealing with a failing company. But what are your thoughts on how do we create more resilience in our kids, in other leaders, in the people we lead? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
You have to lean into hardship and uncertainty. And there are a lot of ways that you can do that. You can do that. Physical fitness is a great way. I recommend that. Go do some hard things, push yourself. That's why I love entrepreneurship, man. I'm really leaning into that because there's so much uncertainty in it. Like, you're leveraged to the max trying to grow a new business and it just falls on you. You're the one who's driving it to encourage your people and navigate through the sleepless nights of where, holy shit, we don't have enough money to make payroll and cover all the expenses. Like, well, guess what? You have to figure it out. Like you are the one who has to figure out where do you get money. You are the one that's not getting paid that month or for 3 months or 6 months while you're making sure you take care of your people. And I enjoy that. And I think you have to. I have so many friends who have said to me, like, I could never do that. They're in conventional jobs and there's nothing wrong with that. Oh. But you will never grow you'll never grow and build an overcome mindset until you can learn to live in an uncomfortable state. So whether that's a physical uncomfortable state or emotional or mental uncomfortable state, and to endure and continue to push through even when you don't want to do it. And that was one of the things that we did with our kids. We always told our kids, one, they always had to do something. My kids are all young adults now. And when they were growing up, they always had to do something. They had to play a sport. They had to be involved in something every quarter. And like anybody, they tried out different things. And sometimes they very quickly figured out they didn't like the thing that they were doing. And they would come back and they'd be like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'd be like, you're going to do this entire quarter until this sport is done. Dad, I hate it. I don't care. You're going to finish. Because it taught them how to deal with something they didn't want to do. And that's life, man. So often that's the case.
Yeah, man. So Angela Duckworth talks about that in Grit, that when her kids sign up, they're not allowed to quit. And I do that with my kids too. Dad, I don't like this. I'm like, how long is it for? The whole year or half the year? Half the year. I'm like, you signed up for it, buddy. I'm like, you got to see it through.
Yep.
And so I love that, man. The other thing I do with my kids, I'm curious what your thoughts on this is. I have a thing with my kids where I'm like, hey, bud, I have two boys. I'm like, and one's 15, one will be 15 in December, and one's 11. I go, hey guys, listen, I don't care what place you come in. I don't care if you're the best. Like the outcome means almost nothing to me. Sure, I'm happy if you do good just because you're happy. I see the only thing I care about is one thing, is you have to show up and do the work and try your hardest. And when I mean your hardest, like you put your heart and soul into it. And even if you don't like it, you have to try your hardest, like no matter what. If you do that, we're good. And if you don't do that, we got fucking words. We got problem. What are your thoughts on that? Like having that type of perspective, because it sounds like you are a very goal-oriented person yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I am. And that's the essence of leading yourself. Lead yourself, and really the essence of leading always. Everybody's going to have strengths and weaknesses. So once again, if you go back, I'm strong for my body weight, but I could never compete against, the big toms in the world out there, the 250 pound just beasts who are like crazy strong. But if I said to myself, oh, well, all I'm going to focus on is my strength, which I can run really fast. So I'm just going to become this blazing. Oh no, the guy, to be effective, I still had to be strong. I just had to figure out how to be the strongest version of myself. That's the difference. People will see that you're pushing to be the strongest, fastest, best version of yourself. And even if, maybe you're on a team and everybody else is here, but if they know you're here and you're pushing yourself to be here, they're going to respect that. And they're going to want you part because they see you just killing yourself. You're leading yourself and leading always. And that's what I tell people. That's what I try and do. I mean, none of us are perfect. We all fall short at times, but you will respect those people instead of the people just say, I suck at this, so I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah, man. Jason, man, I love all your stuff, dude. This has been so fun. I'm so sad we're out of time here, but I'd love to. You got a lot of stuff going on. You got the new book coming out with your wife. Would love for us, and a lot of our listeners are folks that would probably be interested in some of your work around speaking and coaching. Would love for you to tell our audience where can they find the new book, the old books, all the stuff, all things Jason Redman.
All things Jason Redman. You can go to jasonredman.com. That's where almost everything lives. Yeah, we have a ton going on. So new book, Mission Invincible Marriage, comes out in March. Coming through HarperCollins, so it'll be all the major booksellers. And we'll sell signed copies on our website. Speaking, you can find me. I'm speaking all across country. I am cutting back speaking a little bit, and I'm moving into teaching speaking. I've done over 675 paid engagements. I've learned so much about speaking that I'm now trying to teach others. I also launched Patriot Hard Seltzer. So I launched a whiskey-based seltzer. You can buy it in almost 40 states online if you go to patriotseltzer.com, and we are selling in New Jersey. Virginia will probably be the next state. We also have a crowdfunding campaign if you want to become a part of our company. And then I'm joining a new technology-based company that's looking to do some pretty amazing things in the veteran community. I can't talk too much about that one yet, but 2025, I will be doing that to try and help more veterans find purpose and crush it in their lives. So I'm excited about that too.
Awesome, man. So we'll make sure we put all that stuff in the show notes, and super excited for all the greatness you're bringing into the world. You ready for the greatness question, my friend?
Send it.
All right, let's do it. What is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how'd you overcome it?
Yourself. I mean, that's it. Self-doubt, I said it earlier, this little voice in your head that tells you can't do it, the majority of people in this life will sit there and listen to it. And I have that voice all the time. I can still hear my dad in my head telling me you're too small. I can still hear people telling me you're a fuck up and a bad leader. All those things are still there. The difference between people who are successful and those who aren't is the successful people get off that X and ignore that little voice in their head. They take action. Despite the negativity, despite the doubts, despite the naysayers, despite the haters, and oftentimes the biggest voices are right here. That is what has led to my success. That's it. Because if I listen to that voice, I call him my demon. If I listen to my demon in my head, I'd never do anything.
Yeah, man. Dude, I love it, man. Overcome all this amazing work. Like, dude, just keep doing what you're doing. So much greatness coming from you. So much gratitude from us here at the Greatness Machine for you coming on today, my friend. Seriously, it's been an honor and a pleasure.
Darius, my honor, man. I love it. This is great stuff. It's one of my passions to talk about. If I can help more amazing people understand, I'm not that special, man. I'm average, but I chose to be above average. And that's all it is. It's a choice to take action, to drive forward, to ignore the negativity. That's all it is. That's all that makes, from somebody who's unsuccessful to successful.
From your lips to God's ears, my friend. You guys, please go out, share this with everyone needs to hear this. A lot of our listeners, you guys are leaders. Have your teams listen to this. Share Jason's work. Till next time, everybody. Peace out. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.